Today, I want to record one of my projects to document the steps and all of the procedures, tutorials that I followed. The purpose is one, just to share this process to anyone who's interested in deploying Django application to serverless. Two is just for me to be able to refer it back when I need it in the future. So a brief introduction about this project. What I want to do is basically I want to host a Django application, which is a simple chatbot, which I used Open API, and then just basically get the response from ChatGPT's model, and then display it in my own application. So you can ask any question that you can ask in ChatGPT. Like what is chat GPT, and they will answer you, and then also it will show the chat history in here. Like, let's see, how does it work? Okay, yeah, you can I store the chat history here, and then they will answer your question from here. So this is just a simple Django application that I hosted. It's a local in my local environment. That's why you can see it in my local machine. But what I want to do is I want to host this application to somewhere else, and then everyone can access it from the internet. So I can either host them in the server, which I have done before. I hosted in AWS EC2, and then it works fine. Or I can host it somewhere like a serverless. So that's the main project. And from architecture perspective, this is kind of the the flow, data flow for this for my project. Simplified version of data flow. So basically, I host my custom hosting in Cloudflare, which will handle basic DNS, CDN security, and then I will point my DNS to AWS API gateway, which will accept the request from DNS in Cloudflare, and then send it to AWS Lambda, and that will trigger my function in there, and it will talk to my applications. And I used Zappa in this project to basically host my application to Lambda automatically. So I don't need to write Lambda function. I don't need to set up my AWS gateway. Basically, Zappa will handle all of those processes for me. So that's really cool. And before I get kind of describe the process or steps, just the reason, just share why I actually choose to host to serverless. As I mentioned before, I already deployed it to AWS EC2. It worked fine, but there's a lot of things that I need to manage, right? I just listed some of the workload that I need to manage from my perspective. You can see that I need to be involved all of the workload. I need to manage my project. That makes sense. That's what I want to do. I need to manage my packages. That's also what I wanted to do. But I also need to manage my Whiskey file web interface, my web server Nginx in this cases, and my hosting environment Linux. I hosted in Ubuntu. And also I need to have, I don't need to manage hardware directly, but still there is some of my responsibility over there. So basically I need to involve all of this project. If it's a big project, it makes sense, but it's just a personal project. And then it's a lot of hassles, to go through just for one small project for that. That's why I choose to host it to serverless. In serverless, I only need to manage my own project and my own packages, which I want to, and that makes sense for a personal project. And all of other interfaces, other environment will be taken care of by Zappa or cloud provider AWS in my cases. And from cost perspective, it also makes sense because the way serverless services charge is by requests. It kind of aligns with the business model, because if you get more requests, it means you are getting more users or visitors, and of course, it makes sense to pay more for that services. But versus if you use a server, while you might not use a lot, you might use 10%, 20%, but you still need to pay for a full server for that application. So I think it's if it's a small project or simple API hosting, I think it makes more sense just hosting it to serverless applications. Of course, there are many products available in the market. You can host it to Cloudflare Pages or Workers. I host it to AWS Lambda because I'm more familiar with that, and also they have a really they have a lot of support for Python applications, which I'm more comfortable to doing that. That's why I deployed it to AWS Lambda, and that's what this project is, briefly. And there are a lot of steps involved over there. I briefly summarized them as 10 steps. So basically, if you follow those steps, it will be done successfully. But once you've done one time and you find it's so straightforward and so fast, it basically took me, once I understand the process, it took me 10 minutes to finish all of the deployment process. So in detail, basically what you have to do is first to have AWS account, because we use a lot of AWS services in this architecture. As I mentioned, there will be AWS Lambda, AWS Gateway, and there will be database as well. So you need to have IAM users to have a correspondent permission to API Gateway and Lambda. And then you need to install Zappa. Basically, use this code to install it to your own virtual environment. You need to install AWS command line so that your Zappa can talk to Lambda and API Gateway. You need to configure, which will ask you to access key and secret key. You can get them from IAM user configuration. And then you need to start to configure your Zappa. It's kind of really straightforward process as well. They will tell you, they have a clear instructions for what they ask and then what will happen. And then after that, you just need to deploy it with this code, and it will be deployed to AWS Lambda. And of course, you need to, for some of the Django project, the thing is like for Django project, there is SQLite built in with the project. So when you create a project, it will automatically connect it to a SQLite. But Zappa doesn't support this one, so you need to you need to create an external database and connect to your Django application. In my case, I built RDS, PostgreSQL database from AWS, and then connected to my Django application, and it worked fine. And once you make the change, you just need to update your environment. And by this step, actually, you will get AWS API Gateway endpoint so that you can access your application with that endpoint. But what we want to do is we want to access that application with a custom hosting. That's why there's a last step. Basically, this step is you will create a subdomain or any domain that you want to use for this application in Cloudflare and point it to AWS API Gateway. So this is the process as well. You just need to get your SSL certificate so AWS can recognize, traffic from Cloudflare, and then you need to import that certificate to AWS Certificate Manager. It's a fairly straightforward process as well. And once you have that, you can create a custom host name in AWS Gateway. It's also a really easy process. And then that's all. And then this is my applications. I already hosted AWS Lambda. So this is my local environment. Now you can access this chatbot in this one. That's all. I hope it can be helpful.